Hey, Spartan heads. This week we have part one of a two-part episode as we relive the February 4th, 2019 5 overtime girls sectional championship game between the Waldron Lady Mohawks and the Jac-Cen-Del Lady Eagles. Coaches Anthony Thomas and future Hall of Fame coach Scott Smith dive deep into the game that will live forever in Indiana basketball history.
Usually a win in early December, Anthony, and so I got to imagine that bus ride home is always fun, but then you got to get back to work, and you go ahead and you finish out the rest of the season, and you make your way through the sectional, and knowing what's probably going to end up happening is you're going to be going against those Lady Eagles again. What was your team's focus? What was your game plan going into the sectional championship game there in 2018?
Well, we wanted to limit day as much as we could. I wouldn't say make the other kids beat you because they can and they do, but we wanted to limit day as much as possible, and so we worked some things in our defense where we had some keys when certain kids had the ball, different things like that, and we wanted to keep the game a low-scoring game, try not to let their height totally kill us on the glass and with points. And we knew that they were going to run a box and one or a triangle and two. Figured it was coming, and our go-to at that point was Shaw, because really everybody talks about Wood and Sullivan, but Shaw was what made us go on both ends. A lot of things ran through her, just she may not have taken the shot. So even early in the first quarter in this game, or early in this game, she had 6 points before she went down and got her knee hurt. She was getting some looks, she was taking shots. So everything that we tried to prepare for, or thought we were preparing for and trying to do, we were doing. And then she goes down, the momentum changes. But I think we held Day to one field goal in the whole game in regulation. We held her to one field goal in regulation.
Yeah, she only had 3 for the whole game.
Yeah, and it just, our kids did what we asked them to do, and we knew it was going to be a different game. We knew we were going to have to hit some shots. We knew Sullivan and Morgan was going to be limited on looks. The problem, though, with us and that defense is perfect against those group of kids is, although they had a lot of experience, Morgan would get really mad. She would come to timeouts or end of quarter, and her jersey's untucked. And I was like, listen, who's going to do that? I said, she's going to pull your jersey. Yeah, so that was a little bit of an issue with us, trying to keep her going. And but no, that's
It's interesting. You mentioned that, and kudos to John Shaw. John flipped me pictures of the book. And if you can think about, Mariah Day has 22 total points.
Yeah.
And she's 18, I think, for 16 from the three-point line. You're right. I think she has 3 field goals all game.
16 for 18.
22 points.
16 for 18 for the game.
Yeah, she was 1 for 8 from the field. And then she was 16 of 18 from the line in the game. But she was 14 of 16 from the fourth quarter through the final overtime. And she did. And
really the whole team did.
Yeah.
We had kids that were knocking down free throws late in the ball game when they had to. That even now I go back and watch that, and it's like surprising.
Yeah, 42 for the game. That's what they were. And you're like, well, how in the hell were they in it? Well, we were in it because we only turned the ball over 6 times and did some different things. But yeah, they were 32 of 42 for the game, and I think we were 11 of 20.
Into the second overtime, Jac-Cen-Del hits, what does it say, Dave? 1 for 2 free throws to go up 3. So I want to talk about this Bella Larison 3. So talk to me a little bit about what happens there to get the ball in Bella's hands, and what is she thinking, do you believe? And then what's her coach thinking?
Well, a couple of problems with that whole group was you couldn't really call a timeout and run a set. they were awful. And it just wasn't even worth doing. You're just better off letting them go and do something, because we experimented with it early in the season and it was just a complete disaster. We would turn it over. So if I remember correctly, when Bella hit her three, we didn't even call a timeout.
No.
We brought the ball up, kind of goes to the right wing. Bella kind of pops back out the top, and kudos to her. And actually, all the kids, for understanding the game and situation, knew we had to have a three, and she pulls up and drills it. And I just remember thinking, maybe this is our night. Maybe it could be our night. Maybe this is destiny. But for a freshman that gets stuck in the heat of the battle, to know to take that three-pointer, I mean, just to take the shot, in my opinion, says a lot about that kid. But to hit it, it was great. But
So on the opposite end of that spectrum, Coach Smith, you see the no timeout, the ball's on the left-hand side, the ball rotation comes over, and you see Bella Larison catch this basketball. You've got to be thinking almost the exact opposite. That's probably who you want shooting the basketball at that point in time in the ball game.
yeah,
And I think, and I'd have to go back and double check. So I think we were out of timeouts at that point, because Day was shooting the free throw and she hit one and then missed one, and then you guys pushed them. I think there was maybe 25 seconds left, seemed like, and you didn't call timeout.
Right.
And at that point, it was like, yeah, if I had to pick, that's probably who you want to shoot it. And hats off to her. I mean, she didn't hesitate a bit. And I'm kind of like Anthony. Anthony's like saying, hey, maybe this is our night. Back in, I think it was 2006, we were playing Waldron, and we had a similar situation. It was an overtime game, and we were up by 2, and we were shooting a free throw, and our best free throw shooter missed it, and Waldron came down and hit a 3 and won the game at the buzzer. And I'm thinking, in my head, man, this may not be our night. They're knocking down shots, and you always have to have a little luck to win games like that. But I do remember when the kids came off the bench, the first thing we did was clap and laugh and say, hey, this is why you play basketball. This is fun.
Oh, yeah. Go
I,
ahead.
I want to ask Coach Smith about this, because Kurt and I talk about this all the time, and we'll give Anthony a chance to respond to. But what do you think about Coach Thomas and his patented long possessions? That fourth overtime, we watched, they went almost 2 minutes on one possession. I think the entire that old overtime, I think the Eagles had 2 possessions and the Mohawks had 3. But there were several different times in that whole game where Coach Thomas stretched those possessions out, really slowed the ball game down, and especially in that fourth overtime where 4 total points were scored.
Actually, that was the third overtime where there was 4 points, but you're right, Dave. One of the possessions was just over a minute, and the other one was nearly right at 2 minutes, trying to slow the pace of the game down.
Well, honestly, I actually was happy with that. Because if you remember, we got the tip in every overtime, and I think we scored first in all but one of them.
okay. We were possession down every overtime. We couldn't get the tip.
Yeah.
And so we kind of always thought, well, we just want to play with the lead and put the pressure on them. And then plus, it still got down to he has these incredibly smart, quick kids, and if we would have tried to go out and disrupt the possession, we would have. You'll see. I think it was the third or fourth overtime. He pushed the ball up in transition, and I have one kid took one step too far out of her zone. It was Reagan Carroll, and it was a layup. She got right around her and shot a layup. And so I felt content that we could contest any shot and probably get the rebound and as long as we had the lead, that's kind of how I was okay with it.
Yeah.
And for us, it started. I did that in the fourth quarter. We burnt the last,
Yep.
I think, 2 minutes of the game down. And, you know, you have a little foul trouble. You're fatigued. You get into the overtime sessions. I have a bunch of young kids out there. I'm going to live and die. If I can get you to come out just a little bit and I can just get that lane, I'm going to live and die with that shot. So, yeah, there's no doubt about it. I was trying to shorten the game for various reasons. But, we tried it at the end of the fourth quarter, too. And I personally thought he would come out. I didn't think he would let me burn it all down. Well, then I look over at my staff and I said, he's not coming out, guys. I said, I'm just going to take it all the way down and we'll just take the last shot. But our kids always did a good job of moving and working the ball and trying to find the right shot. We just didn't always get that shot. But it became a necessity in that overtime that you're talking about. We're running out of bodies. Everybody's fatigued. And you just hope you get that one little mistake that you can capitalize on. And sometimes we got it, and sometimes we didn't. And a track meet at that point was not advantageous for us at all. I didn't feel.
Yeah.
Strategy, I guess. You know, when I said you don't call timeout with this group because you're not going to run a set, they're probably going to turn it over. But the other side of that is the coaching chess match or whatever that's taking place.
Yeah.
You don't, and I've learned this in my short tenure, you don't want to give Scott a lot of opportunity to set something up either. So, you know, it's kind of twofold there. I'm not going to call it because my kids probably won't run a set anyway. And the other one is I want to scramble and see if I can get something in transition without allowing him to set up a defense or set up what he's going to do if we hit it and things like that, because that's what he's going to do. So there's a little bit of that, believe it or not, that goes on in a split second. It's like, okay, I'm not going to give him that opportunity. But
yeah.
And we talked before, he did exactly what if I was him, I would have done exactly the same thing, because we had been playing junk defense, a triangle and two most of the game. And if he would have called timeout and we were up 3, we would have switched to man-to-man.
Switched it off.
It goes back to that youth, right? I mean, these girls are, what, 14, 15, 16 years old. So, yeah.
It's a lot.
Yeah, at that time, you know, at that point in the game, you had 2 or 3 freshmen on the floor. We get to the fourth overtime. You had like Bogeman and Larison and Garner, right?
Yeah, the last 2.5 overtimes, primarily, I played with the team that I have now.
Yeah,
in a lot of respects.
Yeah, and see, you know, we had Hubbard was having knee issues, and you know, she didn't play the last, I think, 2 overtimes, and but she's a sophomore. Paige Leopard was a sophomore. Katie Coon's a sophomore, and Annabelle Williams is a freshman. So you know, we both had really young teams with one senior on each squad carrying most of the offensive load.
And so when you've got that kind of youth in that, and Coach Smith, you mentioned it earlier, you know, when crazy things like that happen, you really need to lighten the mood and let them all know, hey, look, it's just a basketball game, because you don't want them overthinking the little details at this point in time. You want them to stay loose and stay positive and really look for their opportunity to finish this ball game out, right?
Yeah, because when I was younger coaching, I screwed up so many times in close games or big games. I was trying to be the cheerleader. I was trying to get kids pumped up, you know, because as playing, you know, in men's basketball, you know, the players are like, you know, very aggressive, very yeah. And I wasn't seeing that with some of my kids back then, and so I tried to be the one that did that. And I think all I did at that point was I just put pressure on kids. And so as I'd gotten older and hopefully wiser, I tried to be like the calming voice and still want them to be focused, but, you know, girls get just as pumped and aggressive as what boys do. They just don't show it in the same ways. I don't think.
Yeah, I mean,
agree with that.
and like Coach Smith said, we went back and watched some of the games. I was just impressed with how there must have been water in the girls' veins, because you mentioned Kuhn earlier. She hit her first 2 free throws, first points of the game, late in the first overtime to tie the ball game, and you'd have thought that she had made 100 for 100 that game, and her first points of the whole night come in overtime number 1. So
Yeah, she ends up with 4 points and all 4 for 4 from the free throw line and all in overtimes.
yeah, just incredible. And then on Waldron's side, I think we had something very similar. If we go back in and watch, I believe it was in the, let's see here. There was another overtime where,
Letters, 3-pointer.
yeah, there was some free throws from.
Oh, you're going to see some more of those this year too, by the way.
No, but there was and Coach Thomas, you can help us out here. But I believe one of the girls had shot like maybe 3 for 9 for the season as a varsity player, and she hits 2 big free throws in overtime to tie the ball game. I think it was in the 5th overtime, tied it at 59. Again, you said earlier.
Bogeman, it looks like
it was
2. Yeah.
Yeah,
Bogeman comes in as a freshman, hits 2 big free throws. Larson comes in as a freshman, hits a big 3. Victoria hit a 3 in the game, and she hadn't really taken any. So yeah, I mean, this game is littered with those type of kids, and his kids stepping up hitting free throws, our kids stepping up hitting shots. I mean,
so youth on both sides. I mean, I heard Coach Smith just said a little earlier that they were playing a little bit better than they thought, and had some underclassmen step up, and it was really, a game that lasted 3 hours. You guys had to play way into your bench, and we just saw such young kids on both sides just step up. Thanks for tuning in for part 1, and make sure to tune in next week for part 2 of our talk with coaches Anthony Thomas and the future Hall of Famer, Coach Scott Smith, as we relive the 5 overtime girls sectional championship game between the Lady Mohawks from Waldron and the Lady Eagles from Jac-Cen-Del.